You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Friday, the 1st of September 2023. The reason I stumbled over that, I'm like, the 1st of September?
Since when? I know. It's spring.
Anyway, I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Clare Stephens. And I'm Jessie Stephens.
Today, Mia's got the day off, and so we've got this most special guest. I'm so excited. Jessie Stephens, welcome, welcome.
I have missed this seat, and it's a service to the Out Louders because the Out Louders will agree that you guys are wrong about so much. And I've been listening and just going, oh, you know what this show needs? It needs a bit of me. So I'm jumping on. Look, no Out Louder has said that, interestingly, but I've been in the group kind of wanting to troll people. I mean, Holly's take on Amy Winehouse was just appalling. But anyway, that's not what we're here to discuss. Can't wait to get into it.
Someone had to say it.
Someone did. I was like, devil's advocate, Holly Wainwright.
I am outgunned by Stephen's sisters today. This has never happened before. I'm feeling a little nervous, but it's going to be great. Anyway, before we get started on the show today, I'm going to have a quick word about what's undoubtedly the biggest story of the week. The date for the Voice referendum has been announced. In case anyone has missed it, it's October the 14th, friends. Now, today you'll find the Prime Minister talking to our very own Claire Murphy on an excellent episode of Mamamia's daily news show, The Quickie. They've already created some great episodes about The Voice, and obviously they're going to continue to do that. And on Mamamia Out Loud, we are obviously going to cover it too sometimes because, as all Out Louders know, we're a show about what women are talking about. And since all of us who are over the age of 18 are going to be voting in this referendum, it's pretty front of mind. But we're not a straight news show like The Quickie. Out Loud is a place where we express opinions, we reflect opinions, and hopefully we also model respectful disagreement. So we'll be doing that. We'll be being honest about our personal viewpoints. And I have to tell you, despite what we were just saying about Amy Winehouse, we never fake those in a bid to be representative. So we might not please all of the people all of the time on that front, which is why we'll also be bringing in First Nations voices and experts who know a lot more than we do about it when it's relevant. So on that, we're planning a Voice special where we're going to ask the questions that Out Louders have about the Voice. And we want you to send them to us on email. We're going to be being pretty strict in the Facebook group over the next few weeks because we don't want to add to any of the misinformation and some of the more toxic discourse that's going on. So we would love it if you have a question you would like answered about the Voice, not by Mia and Claire and I, but by people who know better. Email them to us, either written or a voice memo, even better, to outloud@mamamia.com.au, and we will do our best to get it answered for you. On with the show, Jessie Stephens.
On the show today, apparently Holly has a lot of questions about my book. So luckily I'm here, and she's got a big one in particular. So I'm preparing myself. Also, Hamish Blake has been voted Father of the Year. Is that great or nonsense? And what is it that makes a good father? And we wrap up our best and worst of the week, which includes frustrating debate, travelling with your workmates, and that time I was on Q&A. But first,
I got a call saying we've got a patient with an infection problem. We've just removed a live worm from this patient's brain.
In case you missed it, a round worm has been found in an Australian woman's brain in a world-first discovery. A 64-year-old woman from New South Wales first presented to hospital in January 2021 after suffering 3 weeks of abdominal pain and diarrhea, followed by a constant dry cough, fever, and night sweats. At different points in my life, I've had all of those symptoms, and I'm not liking that there could be a wriggly worm. I have them all right now. By 2022, her symptoms had changed, and they included forgetfulness and depression. That's when, at Canberra Hospital, she had an MRI scan of her brain. What they found was a once-in-a-career finding for the neurosurgeon involved. It was an 8-centimetre wriggling worm in her brain.
Oh, dear.
Okay, so that was one of my questions. It was alive? It was alive. All right, cool. Next question, just because we're going there. What did it eat? I believe it ate brain. Okay. I don't know, but I assume in order to survive.
You know how I have pet worms now because I have a worm farm because, as you know, I'm green-fingered goddess these days. There are lots of different types of worms. Do we know what kind of worm
It was a roundworm.
Oh,
It was a
that like
roundworm.
the kind that you have in your poo sometimes?
It's not ringworm. Well, all I know, so they sent the worm.
I thought you were a worm expert and suddenly you don't even know what to eat.
Well, they sent the worm to the laboratory of a CSIRO scientist who is very experienced with parasites. And he recognised it as, I'm going to try and pronounce this scientific
please.
word, Ophidiosaurus robertsi.
Oh, one of
A
them.
roundworm usually found in pythons. The Canberra hospital patient marks the world first case of this parasite.
So, how'd the parasite get in the brain?
Okay, so this is my favourite part. So she lives near a lake area inhabited by carpet pythons
Hate that.
and often collects grasses, like native grasses, to use in her cooking. So the theory is, and it is just a theory, a hypothesis by the doctors, that a python may have shed the parasite via its feces into the grass and she's consumed it, either through her cooking or through her hands and then eating something. That's how it got in.
You know, when we were travelling this week, which more of that later, someone sent me a picture from the street where I live that there was an enormous green python in my neighbour's front garden. So now I'm just like, okay, we're not eating any of my vegetables anymore. Not until I've squirted them with loads of bleach.
No, my lesson from this is no foraging. We don't need to.
And
we
no
don't
shaking
forage.
hands with Holly Wainwright, who
No.
may have a worm on her hand unknowingly
Yes, exactly.
that crawls into the ear and then you feel a brain wiggle.
The fun thing is it can't spread from human to human, luckily. But we should be careful, the scientists say, because this is how so many diseases happen, is human interaction with animals and then disease.
Jessie Stephens, it's been a very exciting week for you. It's one of the reasons, obviously, why you're on today is because you've been doing the rounds talking about your incredible new book, which is your first novel, Something Bad is Going to Happen. We have to clear up, first of all, everybody is like, how is it your first novel? What about Heartsick, that best-selling work of genius? That wasn't a novel, everyone. That was non-fiction.
Yes. My mum's an English teacher and she wasn't aware of the distinction. So novel means fiction and then you've got non-fiction. Second book, first novel.
And it's brilliant. I've read it. We are going to be talking about it, but specifically. So it's about a young woman called Adela who's in her late 20s and she is in a psychiatric unit. And the novel follows basically what has brought Adela to the place that she's in. And it's a really incredible, beautiful, sometimes brutal exploration of mental illness and the life of a young woman in modern times. And it's so good, Jessie. It's so good. I mean, obviously.
Thank you.
It's so good. You've done a brilliant interview already with Mia for No Filter about how much of this novel is based on your own experiences. And we're going to put a link in the show notes to that. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was about how Adela's experience of mental illness impacts the people around her, right? You've written some incredibly moving and confronting sometimes passages about her sister, Lottie, her interactions with her friends. And I think that people who know and love anyone who struggles with mental illness, obviously people who struggle with mental illness are going to feel incredibly seen by this book, and I know they're already saying that. But another group of people who are going to feel very seen are those of us who know and love people who suffer from mental illness and how to kind of handle, support, love people through that. Talk to me about what you wanted to say about that in this book.
I'm really glad that you noticed that because it was one of the most difficult things to write about candidly, because the last thing you want to do is make someone who is severely depressed feel more guilty than they already do about the toll it's taking on everyone else. But to pretend that it's not taking a toll on everyone else is also untrue. And I've been on both sides of that. And I wanted to speak to both because I was thinking even, Are You OK Day is coming up in a couple of weeks. And that day is about asking the people who are not okay if they're okay and then pointing them to helpful resources. The fact that our world ends up becoming separated into the okay and the not okay means that that's an enormous amount of responsibility for the people in families who are well and who might have people around them who have depression or anxiety or bipolar or addiction issues. And they get into a dynamic where they're always the ones looking after the other person. I don't think it's doing us a service either to pretend that something like depression is like every other chronic illness, because it's also not. People say, it's like cancer, or it's like you don't choose it. So in that way it is. But there are behavioral elements that really aren't like that. And so I've been in the situation of being surrounded by people with depression. I feel like I have license to say this because I've also been the person with it, where you think, okay, I can see the wheels are falling off. I can see that you're not sleeping, you're not eating properly, you're making a series of decisions that are not going to be a good thing for your mental health. I can see where this is all going. How do I intervene? Sympathy, does that make me an enabler, or do I do the tough love thing?
And also, if you do the tough love thing and it doesn't work, or you do express, as in one amazing scene in this, Adela's sister Lottie does, when Adela goes to Lottie's engagement party and is basically a massive downer. Yep. She's late. She doesn't talk to anyone. There's a scene where Lottie kind of unloads about that. The thing is that also pushes the person who's suffering away, right? Yeah. Because if you're honest about how that's impacting other people, then that person just becomes more isolated, because they're like, not only is my life awful, but I'm making everyone else's life awful. I mean, this is one of the things about writing fiction is, did you want to offer solutions, or is it more like putting it out there?
That's interesting what you say about writing fiction. It's the only format where you can truly look at both sides and explore the nuance of it as sensitively as you possibly can. Because we know that people who self-harm will often say they feel like a burden. So how do we ever voice the experience of the carers? Because a lot of people are listening to this are officially or not carers of people in their life with mental illness. And the thing is that if you live alongside someone with depression, there might be acute episodes, but it also could be decades and decades and decades. And you're not a qualified psychologist. So your frustration is entirely valid, yet you feel like you can't say the things out loud. Who do you say them to? But they're a part of our lives. Like, you want to say, get it together. You want to say, get out of bed. You want to say, I'm doing all of these things to try and protect and nurture my mental health, and you're not.
What I loved about reading your book is the way it showed the reality that relationships do crumble when you're not well. When you have depression or anxiety, you isolate yourself. And I don't mean that in that you do it in an active, intentional way. I mean that the behaviors that are symptoms of depression
disease,
are things that lead to isolation. And I love that you've got a scene where Adela behaves badly and she really upsets a friend, and the friend cuts her off because she's done something mean and selfish, and the friend is clearly trying to protect her own well-being and deciding that she only wants people around her who are going to treat her well. I wondered, with the Adela and Lottie dialogue, I every now and then thought, these are conversations we've had.
Or wanted to have.
To have. I'm like, Jessie is just putting words in Lottie's mouth that she's wanted to say to me, which are things like, I've tried so hard to not talk to myself like that. And to hear you saying all of those words out loud, to hear the depressive narrative coming out of your mouth is distressing to me and is making it harder for me to live in the bubble I've created. So thanks for that.
You actually talk about this a little bit in that interview with Mia that I found fascinating, which was that because there is depression, I know that this is a work of fiction, I'm going to keep saying that, but you have experience of it, which is why you can explore it so beautifully. You talk about in that interview with Mia how because there is depression in your family among you siblings, that sometimes you're like, oh, I can't be around that because that's going to like literally trigger you, in the correct use of the word trigger. That's a big thing to say, like as in, is everybody all right? How are you all reacting to that being out in the open?
I think that we've all been the ones that are floating and we've all been the ones that are drowning. And both experiences are valid. We have enough self-awareness to know. And this is a conversation you can probably have when you're in a good space. It's not one I would feel like having when I was really down. But there's something very antisocial about my state of depression. It's incredibly narcissistic and self-involved. I'm not saying that everyone's is, but there are features of the illness that make you unable to see the world outside yourself. And you know that. And that's why that's even more depressing.
And unable to take on really obvious advice from people.
I want to know from you two just on this before we move on. I'm telling everyone about this book. I'm like, it is going to change lives, like for people who are suffering, but also people who are caring for people who are. What is helpful? Like, what is helpful for your partners or the people in your family or in your sibling dynamic when you can see that you, in your words, somebody is sinking? What is helpful?
I think knowing, and this is a conversation I've had with a lot of people, that some of the things you're looking at going, they won't get out of bed, they won't do this, they won't do that, if they just blah, are features of the illness. So just framing it like that, I think, is a really important place to start, because then that affords you a bit of empathy. I also think that what this book is about, the people around you, no matter how hard they try, probably can't pull you out of this. It is something that you have to do. And I have a thing in the book about it going, all right, so I'm the illness, but I'm also the cure, because it's all in my head, right? That's also not true, because you don't need to do it yourself. There's help available, which, you know, there's lots of things in the book about how hard that is to get, but you can leave that to the professionals. If you're a spouse or a mother or a sibling, don't think you need to fix this. You're not going to fix it. And that doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means it's actually impossible. That person is ill and needs to get help. So I think directing them to the right people is certainly a start.
I agree that it's not something that somebody else can necessarily cure for you, but I kind of disagree. In the book, there are two characters, and I won't spoil it, but two characters towards the end who play pivotal roles, and they do exactly what it is that you're meant to do. You don't say it in some really didactic way. You just show it in the novel. But they listen without judgment, encourage the person to talk, let them know they're concerned and ask what they need, discuss their strengths and give them positive feedback. They spend time together. They take their feelings seriously. And you really see that it is the people who do that are absolutely crucial to Adela's recovery.
And you're not going to see that recovery overnight. And I think that's another thing. That frustration is,
I want to tell everybody that Something Bad is Going to Happen is available in all good bookshops. But what's also good news is that all Mamamia subscribers, I don't know if you know this, Mamamia subscribers, but you get 10% off books at Booktopia. So if you're a subscriber, buy it from Booktopia. Also support independent bookstores, everybody, but 10% off at Booktopia. We'll put a link in the show notes for you to go and buy Jessie's book.
And I think Booktopia, like, they're very competitive prices. I think at the moment it's like $20 or something, and you get 10% and love it.
Quick delivery.
Mamamia Out Loud. In news that will surprise nobody, Hamish Blake is Australia's 2023 Father of the Year. The team at the Fathering Project, which is a non-profit, they're behind the award, and they've recognised him as a dedicated advocate for fellow dads. He said, "It's very humbling and probably a bit odd for my kids, who ironically don't get to vote. To me, this isn't about winning anything. It's simply a chance to highlight the amazing opportunity we have as dads, mentors or father figures to help shape the future of our kids."
I think the point of being, named this very prestigious title is, it has to be that you just get sort of a moment to happily bring people's attention to the importance of fathering and being a dad, and for my particular take on it, the joy and love and adventure that I think is critical to being a dad. So it's a good thing.
This project is all about running programs to help dads and families connect better, and they want more people to know how important dads are for their kids' lives. So what makes any father a good father? And Claire, what do you make of this award? Is it a bit random, or do you think it's legitimate?
I saw this headline yesterday and my first reaction was, it's a bit strange. I didn't know we still had Mother of the Year, Father of the Year awards in 2023. I don't know why I thought that. I don't know why we wouldn't have them, but my first reaction was, it feels a bit funny to turn fatherhood or motherhood into a competition. Like, how do you judge that? But the closer I looked and the more I read about the Fathering Project and what it was actually about, the more valuable I thought it was. I have long thought that we need to emphasise the importance of fatherhood, and the rebranding of fatherhood in the last decade is something that's given me a lot of joy and a lot of hope. So I went through a phase, maybe some listeners will remember it. I got very obsessed with Hamish Blake.
You do love a bit of Hamish Blake, don't you?
The whole Foster Blake family and their beautiful kids.
But I think it's worth interrogating why.
Yeah.
Like, what was it about them and Hamish that you wanted to look at more closely? Like, what do you think it is?
I loved that he put forward the joy that he got out of parenting. So even, and I know you've talked about it on the podcast before, but like the fact that Hamish makes his elaborate cakes for Sonny and Rudy for every birthday, and Zoe Foster Blake and Hamish Blake have talked about how they take their kids on solo trips. Like Hamish will go on a trip with Sonny, Zoe will go on a trip with Rudy, because that one-on-one time is really important when you've got more than one kid. As much as, you know, you might think, oh, you're making a cake, think of the things that mothers do 365 days of the year that they do not get credit for, and they don't get a million comments saying how great they are. There is something to be said about the fact that for a lot of men, fatherhood has not been something that they've aspired to or something that they've looked at and looked forward to and known that it can be really, really fun. Even having brothers who work in childcare, having a lot of, you know, really engaged dads in my family, I just think it's incredibly important that those stories are at the forefront. Jonathan Thurston is another one who, seeing him with his daughter, I'm like, oh my God. Like, I just absolutely love seeing it. It gives me a lot of hope for how gender equality can change, because a huge part of the progression of gender equality is a bigger role for dads in the family.
Holly, do you reckon that fatherhood's changing?
I think it's really depressing that you didn't think that dads thought it was fun before. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's really depressing in a way to hear that you're like, oh, it's so nice to see a dad looking like he's enjoying being a dad. I'm like, oh.
Do you think the generation above us, like your dad's generation, they didn't openly talk about that?
I'm either exceptional or lucky or something in that I had a dad who was really involved. Both my parents worked outside the home. My dad, I'm sure it wasn't 50-50. Of course it wasn't 50-50, but he always was involved with us, always was involved in cooking, shopping, you know, and I'm obviously a lot older than you two. And my arrangement with my partner, as Out Louders will know, is he does more than I do. So to me, it's not that groundbreaking, but I know that it is in society because it's still commented on. And so I also am a big fan of Hamish Blake's outward joy about fatherhood and his podcast and all those things. But I have to represent a view. And we did say earlier in the show, and it's true, that we don't devil's advocate, but I do listen to other people's opinions, of course, and I know there are women in my life who hate this so much, this what they would see as performative dadding, getting all this credit, because it is absolutely true that the bar is very low for dads, right? For example, a working mother is seen as being an enormous punish if she has to leave work to pick up her kids, right? I've got to leave to pick up my kids. Eye roll. Bloody hell. Why do we employ women? A dad, I've got to leave to pick up my kids. What an amazing guy, right? Any working mother of my generation will tell you that that is infuriating reality, right? That there is a different bar for men. I know in my own life that because Brent was the one very often who would be taking the kids to drop them at preschool or picking them up or doing whatever or volunteering at school, I get told constantly how lucky I am, right? And what an amazing guy he is. He's just doing parenting. That's what he's doing, right? Parenting, if you're in a situation where there are two of you and you're in a heterosexual relationship, that is seen as so weird that it has to be commented on all the time. And it is infuriating, right? And so there are women in my life who are like, oh, Hamish Blake stays up till 2:00 in the morning and bakes a cake for his kids and everybody thinks he's a hero. When a mum, and I've done this myself, is like baking cupcakes for the school at 2 in the morning, she is a disorganized hot mess.
And it's invisible.
Well, there's a lot of invisible work, but even if it is visible, it's like, well, she should be better organized than that, shouldn't she? Imagine not having planned already what the cupcakes are. Like, there is just a different set of rules. But I have to end that by saying, so I totally understand that annoyance. But in my personal opinion, I feel very strongly that domestic equality is the only way that women's lives change. So active fatherhood, as we call it, I guess, has to be modelled, it has to be celebrated, and it has to be normalised. And that's what Hamish Blake is doing. So it's annoying, but I think it's also essential.
As someone who has had only an 8-week glimpse into fatherhood, motherhood, differences between the two, but a very intense glimpse, there are a few things I've recognised that have taught me a lot about the positioning of fatherhood culturally. So the first is that you have a baby, it's straight onto sort of breastfeeding, feeding is the biggest thing, and it is often a conversation between you and the midwife. The father's in the room, but it's you and the midwife, right? The support I got in those early days is very woman to woman. Then what happens is you go to your community nurse and they say, look, there's a mother's group, and looked at Luca, who was in that appointment with me, and said, fathers don't go. Basically, fathers aren't welcome. That's a mixture of a lot of things because it's obviously like most men don't take the time off, whatever. And I have thought a lot about the support. A lot of my friends have kids. I'm in constant group chats with women with kids. I've worked with you and Mia for a million. There's so much I know just from the environment I'm in and the communities that exist for me that make this transition not easier, but I know what motherhood's meant to look like. And I look at Luca, and because he is the first in his friendship group to become a father, I've had moments of worrying, of going like, where are you meant to look? Where do you sit and go, whether it's offloading or whether it's the joy or whether it's going, what am I meant to do when the baby, whatever it is, he does not have that community. And so I listened just this week to a few episodes of How Other Dads Dad, which is Hamish Blake's podcast on fatherhood. And it is outstanding. I loved it. And I've got Luca onto it because it's about a new model of fatherhood. Generations ago, it was they provide, the mother actually does the parenting. Hamish Blake talks about dadding as a verb, which, you know, motherhood, parenting is something that women talk about, but dadding, I was like, that's really cool.
You're not just a dad, you actively dad.
And also it's important to point out to the people who are eye-rolling about him getting Dad of the Year because he makes cakes or whatever. That's actually not why he got it. He got it because he has created that show and because he is creating a community of dads, as you're saying, Jessie.
And I can't explain how grateful I was during pregnancy when I was terrified and when the messaging I got was about how hard it is, how you're going to lose your identity, how you're never going to sleep, blah, 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 which there are elements of truth to that. When I saw the joy that Hamish Blake and Maddie J is the other one and Laura Byrne showed of raising their children, and it's a mess. It's not like they're saying this is easy and perfect, but when they highlighted the joy, it meant there was hope and excitement about that period. And I think having that blueprint for people is really important, and I think it's lacking.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more about dad role models, right? Because and obviously it's a long time ago now, but when I went back to work when Matilda was 6 months, Brent did join my mother's group. Like, he literally did. We used to meet every Wednesday morning at a coffee shop. Aww. And one Wednesday morning, instead of me sitting there, it was Brent with Matilda. And there are many funny stories about that, what happened after that. But Brent is a particular kind of dude who wasn't intimidated by that, wasn't embarrassed or scared, and he's very gregarious and he likes women and all that stuff. That's not going to work for everybody, right? And I remember so clearly, because I knew this was coming up in our parenting, when I sat with the community nurse and she said what she'd said to you, Jessie, which is like, mother's group meets every Wednesday, blah. I said, do you know if there's a father's group? And she laughed and she said, oh, as if there'd be one of those. And she's like, where would they meet anyway? What, at the pub? Like, that was entirely her view. So I agree. Like, we've got to change this narrative.
I heard Rob Sitch say that the first year of his first child's life was the best year of his whole life. And I don't hear that enough. To hear that, I think, is great. And the other point that's probably worth just putting a full stop on it is that talking about time and spending time with your kids as well, there's an element of privilege to that. And I look at Hamish Blake and there are dads all over the country who would look at him and go, I wish I had the time and the holidays and I could go and spend time one-on-one with my kids, but I work my ass off and I don't have the time or the resources.
And cost of living crisis, like it's not going to be particular parents' fault that they can't spend the time with their kids that they want to. Just on podcasts, Maddie J's podcasts, Two Doting Dads. Also, excellent dad content, normalising humour around parenting to really engage dads. I'm into celebrating the dad, and I think...
So am I, but we've got to raise the bar for them. The celebration should come when they're doing a really good job, not just turning up every now and again at pickup.
If you want to make Mamamia out loud part of your routine 5 days a week, we release segments on Tuesdays and Thursdays just for Mamamia subscribers. To get full access, follow the link in the show notes, and a big thank you to all our current subscribers. It is Friday, which means we're wrapping up the week with our best and our worst. If Holly's best isn't hanging out with me while we travel to Melbourne and Brisbane, then we're going to have a fight. But Jessie, kick us off with your worst.
My worst is sort of loosely related to my best. Like, we know this, but sometimes when it happens, you just want to scream. This week I was on Q&A, I did the project, I did Studio 10, I did a bunch of media for my book, and it was great fun.
Tonight, joining our panel, editor at Mamamia, Jessie Stephens. She's just published her debut novel, Something Bad Is Going to Happen.
On Q&A, there was a question about housing, and I just delivered the most basic line about...
The thing that makes the most sense to me is reading a bit about vacancy tax and sort of the fact we have potentially 1 million houses that are empty and then we have a whole lot of people who can't find housing. Just the maths isn't mathing for me.
Anyway, then I see the Daily Mail has picked it up. Someone sent it to me. And this is the headline they went with. Fed up young Aussies deliver a brutal message to boomer landlords. As fears grow, war of generations will soon turn nasty. And it had a picture of me. It looked like I'd gone on a rant on Instagram.
It looked like you were yelling,
It looked like I was yelling. It was a joke video I did about showing off my engagement ring. And they took that picture and put it on. And it's on the bloody splash of the Daily Mail. And I thought, I've never used the word boomer in my life. Like, it made me sound really contemptuous.
It's not what you were saying at all.
It's just not what I said. And I looked at that and I went, I hate what that person's saying. And then I went, wait, I'm meant to have said that and I didn't even say that. And then, of course, the DMs flood in like, F you bitch, you blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well,
you know nothing.
I agree with your sentiment because I also disagree with the headline. It's just I never said that.
I disagree with that silly woman who said that.
This stupid little blonde upstart who's having a go at boomers, she sounds like an idiot. And the reason it was my worst is I just, like, the media does this and I hate this war of generation shit and everyone's so divided. It's just such a reminder that when you see a headline like that, literally 10 times out of 10, they didn't say that. That's not what the point was.
Wasn't the context.
It wasn't the context.
Yes, I've had a thing, I've been talking to Holly about it recently, that you know how mum teaches year 9, like comprehension?
Yeah.
Like listening and reading comprehension?
Yeah.
I think that there needs to be some adult lessons of that because you get it from stuff you do on TV, you get it from stuff you write, you get it from stuff you say on podcasts, and people say, I can't believe you said
that.
this. And you're like, but I didn't.
I had that recently. I said, I didn't say that. And they were like, well, I'm not going to go and listen to the podcast. And I was like, well, you should, because I didn't say that. And then I saw a comment and it goes, easy for her to say, she's worth $17.9 million. And I was like, where's my $17.9 million? And then someone said, Google it. And if you Google Jessie Stephens' net worth, one of those AI websites says I'm worth $17.9 million.
Oh, my
and
God.
I just
You're worth $17.9 million.
Wow, how'd you make that?
I don't know where they got it. I was like, I feel like there's been a decimal issue somewhere and they've hacked the bank and it's actually like 1,700.
Yeah.
I was like, What is going on?
Okay, if you're worth that much, you should buy me lunch today.
I owe you guys a coffee.
Yeah.
Now, my best book release week is very exciting, and it's 2 years in the making. You know you've tried to do something, you don't know whether it's paid off yet, but it's out into the world. I saw this thing on Facebook recently. It might have been in the Out Louders. I didn't fully read it, but I got the gist. It said that there's no difference between the big joys and the small joys. Maybe the glimmers thing?
Yeah, I think it's about glimmers.
It might have been about the glimmers.
Yeah.
So the big joys in life obviously feel amazing, but then there are these small joys and they're actually exactly the same level. This week, it's just been so wild to kind of, you know, go and do television and have people buy your book, and it's a big life moment. But then you go home to this tiny baby who wants a cuddle or gives you a smile or you give her a bath and you go, it's the same joy.
Oh,
that is
my
a
gosh.
revelation to me, to see that life is full of both, as well as, you know, big
Disappointments and small disappointments.
Yeah, exactly. They're also all around as well.
Oh, Jessie.
But a week of big and small joys.
Holly, your worst.
My worst this week is Kanye West. Sometimes Kanye West, surprisingly, and Mia and I do not agree about this, is one of my bests because I actually quite like a bit of Kanye West.
Yep.
And my daughter, who is 13 and a half, loves some Kanye West, which is awkward sometimes when you're in the car and some of the words that are being thrown around the car.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I know I shouldn't be bopping. Should we use the word bopping?
But my daughter wants to be a gold digger. Yeah.
Exactly. I know I shouldn't be bopping along with some of this misogyny, but damn, it's a good tune. Anyway, This week there were some paparazzi images of Kanye West in Venice with his alleged partner, girlfriend, like whatever, Bianca Censori, who I believe is Australian.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like committing a lewd act in public on a boat in Venice, surrounded by other boats in Venice.
I haven't seen these pictures, but because part of me when I heard this, I went, is this an invasion of privacy? But what you're saying is that it was very public.
So it was not an invasion of privacy, right? I kind of hate that I'm talking about this because now people will go and look at the pictures and they're the most depressing pictures you've seen in a very long time, where sitting in a very public place, he's got his pants down and she is kneeling in front of him. We can imagine the rest of it, right? Now, the reason this is my worst of the week, what Kanye West and his consenting girlfriend decide to do on boats in Venice is none of my business. But I just had this overwhelming as a motherness come over me when I saw these images, because there is something really disturbing, and I hate projecting onto other women. Like, there's a lot of commentary that's like, she looks like she's his slave. She looks like she's not. I mean, I can't say that. I don't know what their dynamic is. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe she's living her best life every moment. But there is a very almost sinister vibe about the dynamic, the presentation. Like, it just feels so grim. And the thing that made it my worst of the week is then I saw it, I looked at it, and then I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to talk to my daughter about this, because she and all her friends, male and female, even though they know that Kanye West is problematic, politically problematic, you know, all of those things, they still are fascinated by him.
Yeah.
And there's only so much of that kind of teachable moment shit you can do with your kids that they're going to listen to. But what I just want to say to her, and I say to her all the time, is like, the way that he presents women in his songs and apparently in his life, judging by what's going on at the moment, is not reality. And it's not lots of women's reality, and it shouldn't be aspirational. There were also images last week of his 40th birthday party where he had naked sushi ladies. I thought they went out of fashion like a long time ago, like women models lying on tables covered in sushi, and his children are picking, and you just think Kim Kardashian must be having a conniption somewhere. She must be having a conniption. I don't know. Am I like, have I become one of those pearl clutching nanas?
No, I went and then looked at the commentary because I saw it and I went, what are people saying? And there's kind of a running joke that it's like, yeah, what a boss, what a king.
Yeah, right?
Like he deserves that because he wrote like some of the greatest music of all time.
There's something performative,
like,
as though he's standing there as the most powerful man in the world. Like the sex act doesn't seem to be between them. It seems to be towards
it's for the audience.
Yeah.
It's for the audience. Like, it literally is. I mean, And it also doesn't appear to be, not that there should be, but like there's no joy in that. Like there's no, there's just everything about it is what you want to tell your daughter. Like this is not what sex is. This is not what power dynamics in relationships is. Anyway, so I'm in a spin about Kanye. That's my worst of the week. My best, actually, Claire Stephens, was travelling with my workmates. We missed you, Jessie Stephens, but we were on the road this week, not for a live tour, but we were doing what are called upfronts, which is every media company tends to do them, where you go and you talk to advertisers and marketers and people who you work with all the time about what's going on at Mamamia, what our research is telling us about women and what we've got coming up. And so this week we've been in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. Our Sydney actual upfronts is next week. And so lots of planes, lots of hotel rooms, lots of sitting around in green rooms. And I just love all the people I've worked with. They're just funny. We went with like Lee Campbell, Elfie Scott, Mia and Claire and I were sitting in this green room yesterday morning. Poor Claire. She's like pregnant, freaking exhausted.
I'm just whinging constantly.
Mia loves to have a fight before you go out to perform anything, as Claire knows really well. So she's trying to poke me into having a big discussion with her about something. We're discussing the voice referendum.
She wants you to have a really strong opinion and you're often like, I don't know, I'm learning. And she's like, argue with me, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. And Elfie's so clever, and Lee is just always sitting there going, can we talk about shopping?
Yeah.
But like
Lee's like, do you really talk about this?
And we're like, we're not that smart, but I don't know anything about shopping, so I can't talk about
I loved. And then she found the best light for a selfie and we all abandoned the conversation and went to the selfie light. There is no one to me more aspirational than Elfie Scott. Claire took a photo of her at the airport just to sleep on the floor, and I was like, that is the mood we all need to adopt.
The thing I loved, it was 1:30 p.m. She had a full night's sleep the night
and
before.
she was like, God.
I
love her so much.
Oh, so my best of the week was actually, yes, I've been away from the family, which can be hard. I'm back now, which is great. But traveling with you guys was so much fun. Claire, what are yours?
My worst is, so obviously the date of the voice referendum was announced earlier in the week. And it sort of hit me immediately as I started seeing people share which way they were going to vote. And then I started seeing the commentary beneath people's posts. I've realised the next 6 weeks are going to involve the frustrating experience of reading a lot of misinformation. And I find it really disheartening, and so much fear has been created and some really prominent voices have contributed to confusion in areas that should be really straightforward. It's not the difference of opinion that bothers me so much as the misinformation and the doubling down on misinformation, and the fact that I feel like it's had so long to metastasize and things have just been taken for granted that are simply not true. So I had a really down moment of realising the next 6 weeks are going to be really difficult, and I cannot imagine how difficult they are going to be for Indigenous Australians. I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness and a bit despondent. But my best is the people who are able to respond with patience and respect with facts. They are my absolute glimmers at the moment. So there's an excellent podcast on the ABC called The Voice Referendum Explained, and it's hosted by Carly Williams, Quandamooka woman and journalist, and Fran Kelly, who's a radio presenter, journalist, political correspondent. There are 2 episodes out so far, basically what are we voting for and where did the voice come from? And they are just so calm, considered, rational, and engaging with every viewpoint and really breaking down the no side, that there are kind of 2 components to the no side, and the fact that those 2 no sides sort of aren't in agreement. Like, I've just learnt so much from listening to that, and it reminds me that the only way to have respectful disagreement is to do it with patience and respect.
Narelda Jacobs also did on her Instagram, there's a video where she asked a bunch of questions, really the questions that you have, where she's asked an expert, and that's also been really helpful, I think, the patience that she has to be able to sit there and...
Yeah. It must be so exhausting.
Yeah.
Because I think you'd be well within your rights. And on this podcast, there are snippets from, Indigenous Australians who you can just hear that they are exasperated and they would be well within their rights to be like, for God's sake, like
read the 440 words and leave me alone.
Yeah. But the people who have the patience and are engaging with all sides and acknowledging that everybody in this country has a right to know what they're voting on. I am in awe of those people, and that's been my best.
Jessie, have you got a recommendation for us before we go?
I do. A book that I read while in labour.
Oh, I hate you.
I can't believe you were reading books
Like, that's
in
just
labour.
such a freaking...
Like, come on.
Everyone should be reading a book in labour. Like, shut up.
I didn't say that.
Yeah,
though.
well, you're implying
And when your
it.
labour goes for 3 days, you have some time.
Oh, shut
And
up.
I was trying to distract myself with a good book. So it must have been a good book, because if it wasn't, I'd have put it down. It's called The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. Has anyone read this yet?
No, but I would like to.
I haven't. It's literally the next one on my list.
So she did Sentimental in the City with Dolly Alderton.
Isn't she a YA writer?
Yes, YA. She's a New York Times bestselling YA writer, and she's a podcaster who is laugh out loud, very, very, very funny. And she does sentimental garbage. Love her tone. I hadn't read anything by her before. Her tone throughout this is so funny and warm. If you love that podcast, you will love this book. It's sort of a coming of age book about friendship and youth and ambition. And
This isn't young adult.
no,
right?
so
adult.
this is her
Yeah.
first adult one. And it's about a young girl named Rachel and a friendship she has and a crush she has. And trust me, you will love it. It's not light necessarily, but it's not going to make you feel like shit. It's not going to make you feel anxious. It's just wonderful.
Which is what her podcast is. You just smile while you're listening
and
to
she's
it.
a beautiful writer. The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue.
If you're looking for something else to listen to, on yesterday's Subscribe episode, Holly, Elfie and I unpack the meanest things anyone has ever said about us. I had to argue.
some of us do.
Some of us do. I had to argue for this to be a topic. We talked about how we handle it personally and what we can all do in our daily lives when we face the commentary about us on social media, and that's something everybody has to contend with because most of us have social media profiles and most of us find ourselves being judged in
Every
ways...
time I post a picture of my baby, someone says that I'm doing something that will kill her. So
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
just- yeah, it's great.
Darling. A link to that episode will be in the show notes.
Thank you for listening to Australia's #1 news and pop culture show. The episode was produced by Emeline Gazilas. The assistant producer is Tahli Blackman, and we've had audio production from Leah Porges. Thank you, Jessie Stephens.
Thank you for having me. I will
Been so good.
be back very soon.
Bye.
Bye. Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do it. There's a link in the episode description.